So I wanted to watch this because I was, I think I was in the ward when this happened, which was Geraldo Rivera, which we watched the segment where he got slapped around by a wrestler, went on Fox News, which that's not a news story. And he talked to Dan Bongino, our favorite, what's the politically correct term to refer to him?
He's like a Republican ideologue.
Meathead. Meathead. That's the correct term to refer to him. He talked to him and basically disagreed with him on Israel-Palestine, and he was actually highlighting like the amount of Palestinians who are getting killed on Sean Hannity's show, and it got pretty fiery, and it actually really surprised me because I don't really have a lot of respect from the man. To be fair, like I know him mostly through that wrestling thing and his old like just hardcore libertarian takes, so I haven't actually seen him talk about foreign policy before. So maybe he's more of a Ron Paulian type person. Who knows? Anyway, I wanted to watch this and give this a quick look-see.
It's shocking and outrageous to me that in all the discussions of what's happening in Israel, the fact that Palestinians are being killed at the rate of 15 or 20 times the death toll among the Israelis, including children, is absolutely...
Now I believe that number is, that percentage is even higher.
Geraldo, let me stop you.
It is abhorrent to me.
He just starts to make a statement, and immediately Sean Hannity is like jumping down the throat. Like, wait a second, we're going off script here.
The Palestinians are digging themselves out from under the collapse of their buildings.
How about the terrorist organization Hamas stop firing those rockets from hospitals and schools and densely populated areas? Because they're the ones that fired first. If American City got hurt, it would be all America, all hands on deck. And if innocent people die,
The problem is that you can look at groups like Amnesty International or other international organizations or the vast majority of people on the UN Security Council, the UN Human Rights Council, or really any humanitarian organization that doesn't have its head firmly up its ass. And you ask them about Palestinian death tolls, and they will say that it's not that the Israeli government like when it does all of its strikes is directly just like going down to mow down all civilians, is that they show a callousness towards civilian casualties. And most certainly Benjamin Netanyahu is going to show a callousness towards civilian casualties. There was multiple ceasefires proposed that he delayed, whether it was the one proposed through Russia or the one that was eventually accepted that I was proposed from Hamas through Egypt. And I think much of the violence with anybody with two brain cells to rub together, and they don't jingle when their head doesn't jingle when they sleep at night, because when they like turn their head on the pillow, it's just the two brain cells banging around the side of their skull, would be able to realize that the decisions that's being made by Benjamin Netanyahu to continue the violence after multiple ceasefires were proposed is because he's in a corruption scandal and a political fight for his life as prime minister, as the longest serving prime minister in Israeli history, as coalitions are being formed against him to oust him, as he has to continue to hug the far right like Ben Gvir, who was then calling him a terrorist sympathizer because he restricted access to the Temple Mount and wanted to stop certain Israeli Day protests. So when you continue violence, obviously, because of domestic political considerations, which has real life results for the people on the ground, more dead bodies, when you show a callousness towards civilians, like I don't know what people are going to tell me, but there was multiple clearly marked UN buildings, UN schools that many people flee to from bordering towns that were, because of course, like they were scared of an Israeli invasion, which, I mean, Israel basically told like foreign reporters, like an invasion is coming, there will be a foreign invasion. It was just a trick, very obvious trick, to try to like get Hamas out of hiding, as they then targeted Hamas's tunnel network once Hamas filled up those tunnels. But those UN schools were hit. That's not to talk about the AP journalists or any of that. Well, what about on the border protests, on the journalists that were killed, or the children that were shot? Or, I mean, I don't know if maybe that camera looked like a rocket launcher. Maybe the medic shot were actually just, maybe it was a Hamas med kit that, when applied to anyone shot, would immediately make them want to wipe Israel off the face of the earth. I don't know the logic behind it, but it's a callousness towards civilian casualties that scares me. It's not that Israel doesn't have a right to defend itself, is that I believe that any military force should have a serious consideration for civilian casualties. Definitely any military force that has the overwhelming leverage and power in this situation, as Israel continues to make security arrangements with nations that it's normalizing relations with, whether it be Qatar, the UAE, or its extremely powerful air force, or the fact that it's one of the most well-structured and well-trained militaries in the entirety of the Middle East. It's a nuclear power. It has the Iron Dome defense system, extremely accurate artillery. Like, that's what I want to see. And don't take this at any. If you do, I mean, I'm sorry, you're one of those two brain cell individuals that it sounds like a bell, like a jingle bell when you walk around town. Don't take this as some weird implicit endorsement of Hamas. Hamas is a disgusting anti-Semitic organization that deliberately targets civilians with its missiles. And that's disgusting too. And Hamas has stored its weapons next to children, which it should be condemned for. A prime example would be during the 2014 war, where it did store weapons next to where children were playing on the playground. So I just wanted to put that out there, because anytime I say this, everybody, the first jump is, wait, Israel should consider civilian casualties in its strikes? What about Hamas? So I just want to get that right out of the way. Hamas is disgusting. Hamas is terrible. No questions about it. And personally, any organization that's homophobic, I'm not going to have a great view of. And Hamas is not really known as an LGBTQ plus ally. Could I get, would it be possible for me to get a Hamas representative for the LGBTQ plus dating show I have later today? Could I get a few Hamas members on that? Probably not going to happen, sadly. But the open invitation is out if they want to come on. Maybe there's a few cuties in the organization. Who knows? Anyway, it's the callousness towards civilian casualties that needs to be considered when looking at the situation.
Blame the people that start the war.
There are dozens of Palestinian children dead. There are dozens of Palestinian children dead.
And whose fault is that?
With ammunition provided to Israel by the United States.
Well, the answer, okay, so I believe like the estimations was about 50% of the people killed were civilians, which I don't know why, but anytime I said that, I'd see a few people like in chat or somewhere being like, 50% civilians? Yo, that's a pretty low number. I'd see that legitimately, because they would compare it to previous operations where it was a higher percentage. And I'm like, that's not good if you consider that a low number. It's like,
that is as much a civilian extermination campaign as it is a military campaign.
yeah. Not to mention, like, there's a 48% unemployment rate in the Gaza Strip, and when you're destroying their infrastructure, like, that's not going to be helping that at all. And we're just talking about death tolls here, right? That's another thing. When we talk about what's going on, what you hear is the death toll numbers, because that's the most powerful, impactful thing. We're not talking about the long-term mental health effects that it's going to have on children who had to, like, celebrate religious holidays with their friends getting blown up just 2 blocks down. We're not talking about the long-term impact on Palestinian infrastructure, UN schools, just one of the few places that are supposed to be safe for children, getting bombed. We're just talking about the death tolls right now. But if you were to legitimately ask me, whose fault is it? We'll say Netanyahu, the IDF, the Israeli government, and Hamas. It is partially Hamas's fault. If I store my for example, let's say that I store all my cocaine as a drug lord in a kindergarten, and then some children get hurt due to criminal activity that is happening around that kindergarten. Now, the police would most certainly be at fault if they did an all guns blazing raid on that kindergarten to get that cocaine. Of course, the police would be at large scale fault. So would the people who stored the cocaine there, which put those children in harm's way. I do want to say that to make that perfectly clear. If you can't get that an understanding in your mind on how somehow that organization, which put that there, is also at fault, then I'm sorry, but you're brain dead. You are brain dead. If I went outside with a child around me and a gun, and he was using that child as a human shield, and then the child and me got shot by authorities, you can't say that the person who held that child was not at any fault possible. Of course the person was at fault possible. They were specifically using that child as a tactic of defense. Anyway, so a lot of people are at fault. But what Sean Hannity wants is, it's just Hamas's fault. It's not the fault of the people who pulled the trigger. It's not the fault of the people who showed callousness towards casualties. Not the fault of the people who purposely extended the conflict for domestic political considerations to get more votes from the Israeli far right. Because what is a better advertisement for Netanyahu than the sound of sirens signaling people need to flee to bomb shelters?
States without even a demand for a ceasefire.
Fault
I
is
demand
that?
a ceasefire. I demand
that Israel win the war.
What does that
Israel
even
needs-
mean? I demand Israel win the war? Okay, here's your question, Sean. What was winning the war gonna look like? An invasion of the Gaza Strip? They annex Gaza? Do they destroy all Hamas operations and operatives? How much damage would be necessary to do that? What is winning the war, Sean? What is winning the war here? You can't just... It would be like me saying right now, like we need to win the war against drugs. Like, what does that even mean at this point? Does that mean we get all the drugs off the street? We stop all drug consumption? We take out every cartel? Like, you can't just pound your chest and goal or pursuance of victory without having clear guidelines. This was Barbara Lee's main criticism of our invasion of Afghanistan, and the reason she was the only woman, the only congressperson who voted against invading Afghanistan wasn't because she was against going after the people who killed almost 3,000 Americans on 9/11. It was because she didn't think that we had clear enough guidelines for what the terms of victory would be for when we would come home afterwards. So you can't just say, win the war. Like, what do you mean, win the war? What does that even mean?
To win the war against terrorism
By what? Killing
and terrorists
all the Palestinians?
that are
We're gonna kill
firing
all the
rockets at their
Palestinians.
people.
Let's kill them
Dan
all. Let's kill
Bongino.
all these children.
Wait, so Sean Hannity just yells back at him like, I want to win the war. Doesn't even let him finish his point, and then throws it to Dan. And I think he got, Geraldo only got like one sentence out uninterrupted, and then they just yelled over each other. Oh my gosh.
Dan.
Geraldo, you do this every time. This is such garbage, and I'm really getting sick of it. You play this emotional game with the audience and use your position of responsibility to put out misinformation and
stop
BS.
attacking me.
Emotional game with the audience. Sean Hannity was just beating his chest like, we must win, we must win, we must win the war on terror, without giving clear guidelines of what that would even look like. Like, what, just destroy all of Hamas? Like, wipe Hamas off the face of the planet? Like, what does that mean? Like, win the war on terror? Okay, then Hamas is gone. Well, what about Hezbollah? What about Fatah? Ben Shapiro thinks Fatah is and Hamas basically the same thing anyway. Like, what? Like, where does it end? Palestinian Islamic Jihad. Once you finish operations against Hamas, then there's Palestinian Islamic Jihad. And Palestinian Islamic Jihad, I would even consider a much more radical organization than Hamas. And that is saying something. So what does that even mean? Like, Geraldo's like got to say like one sentence, and Fox News is nothing but just emotional baiting, whether it be about defund the police or trans bathrooms or or the entire like narrative they have painted about this conflict has been nothing but Hamas missiles, highlight Hamas missiles, highlight Hamas missiles, without like showing the clear reality on the ground.
on the police thing.
Address
where
the
you
issue.
did it,
Do you have the
you
guts
did
to
it
address
on
the issue
police thing
and not
again.
address?
This
is not
control
about
yourself,
me.
can you?
You didn't come
Ever.
on this show
you
to
can't
attack
control
me.
Yourself.
You came on
no,
the show to talk about
you,
the issue.
Because again,
do you have a point about
you're
the
using
issue?
your position of authority
I'm sick of you,
here
Bongino.
to
I'm
say
sick of
things
you.
that
You're a
are
punk.
absolutely outrageous.
You're a punk, Bongino. You're a punk. He's throwing paper at him. I love this. I love the passion from Geraldo over here. I love it.
You're
let
an
him talk.
uncontrolled lunatic.
Geraldo,
I'm sorry,
let him talk.
because you can't go on the air.
I'm an out of
Can
control
you calm
lunatic.
down? Yeah.
Biden refuses to condemn, and look at the Titantron below this. Biden refuses to condemn the anti-Israel extremists inside his own party. I don't even know what he was saying. And look, Senator Ted Cruz coming up next. When I was in the ward, the channel was stuck on Fox News and Joel Osteen. And Joel Osteen bought a paid program. So I had Fox News, then Joel Osteen, then more Fox News. And that was my morning programming. And I didn't know how anybody could sit through such nonsense for any extended period of time. It was such a painful experience for a Sunday morning. And remember, I went to the ward to not be insane, and then they put on Joel Osteen and Fox News. Maybe the idea was that if they make me so insane by making me watch these programs that it has like a max like level of insane, which is like 100, right? And then like it'll go so high that I'll just default back to 0. And then I'll be cured. Like I gotta hit the tipping point.
Yeah, you really
I'm a
need to calm
10-time
down.
Emmy winner
Maybe
with
try
deep
a
experience
meditation
in the
app or
Middle East.
something.
Have you ever even been there?
All right,
Have you
I
ever
want to
even
make
been
my
there?
point, Sean.
I've covered
Sean,
every war
I
since
want to make my point when he
1973.
stops talking.
Damn.
Geraldo,
When he
let him
stops
talk.
talking, I do have a point. to
If your
make.
point
Okay,
is
thank
about
you. I
me, I'm not
appreciate
going to
that.
stop. If your point's going to be about me, I'm not going to stop.
Geraldo Rivera does not understand that Hamas doesn't believe in Israel's right to exist.
There it is. There it is. Immediately, like, come on, just make a point about this, and then immediately, look, if it's just another thing, you're gonna be moaning about me, that I'm not gonna stop. I have covered all these conflicts. I know this stuff deeply. You're just some meathead on Fox. Please make a point about the issue. Then Dan opens his mouth, and of course he can't help himself, and he slides right back into it. Geraldo believes this. Geraldo won't acknowledge this. Do you really think that Geraldo is like a fan of Hamas? Everyone at this point knows that Hamas denies Israel's right to exist, that it wants to liberate it from sea to shining sea, or I forget the exact phrase. That's in its charter. Yes, we know that. Even its reformed charter, quote unquote reformed charter, is extremely radical, anti-Semitic, and disgusting. We understand that. But if you go the next step of using the little thinky parts up here, you'd also realize that Hamas has no chance in hell of ever achieving that goal. So, if we acknowledge that, then we should be talking about, okay, if they have no chance of achieving that goal, how can we actually find a long-term solution to this, since Israel's security is protected by, let's say, nuclear warheads? I mean, what is it? Like 90 nuclear warheads is the estimated number, with enough like uranium or like resources they have to make 180 to 200 nuclear warheads max. And like 90 nukes. So yes, Hamas is disgusting. Their rocket attacks are disgusting. Their suicide attacks, the stabbings, all of it. Disgusting and terrible. And does deserve a response. But I don't think a proper response to, hey, civilian casualties bad is, well, Hamas bad. Because then what you're saying is every single casualty is justified by the fact that Hamas is bad, which could justify a huge swath of war crimes and disgusting behavior. Imagine if any time we dropped a bomb and it killed 20 German civilians during World War II, we said Nazis bad, all Germans fair game, screw you, Nazi sympathizer. That's the level of what this is right now. I mean, imagine if after the fact, if somebody asked, like, well, justify the firebombing campaign in Japan, which actually killed much more civilians than the nuclear bombs. And then I just responded, Japan bad, Japanese Empire bad, Nanking. That wouldn't be a justification.
Exist. Hamas wants the Jews dead. And what does he do? The same thing with the police issue. He makes this an emotional thing, and
he's turned around. He's not even looking at him anymore. Geraldo won't dignify Dan Bongino's face with his presence. He won't even look at him. He's so repulsed by him that he can't even look at the guy.
Says the Palestinian children. Of course we care about.
He's recovered himself. He's recovered. He's now ready to engage again.
Palestinian children. You know the way we save Palestinian.
What did he just say? Did he say Palestinian children? What?
And he says the Palestinian children. Of course we care about Palestinian children.
Palestinian? Palestinian children? You know, I have heard a lot of information about the high death toll number of Palestinian children, but I haven't heard about the Palestinians. That sounds like a subsect of Italian.
No, it's a small sect of Palestinians from Spain.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
You know the way we save Palestinian children is we incentivize the terror group Hamas to not fire rockets indiscriminately into Israel, and it would stop immediately.
Wait, incentivize them not to fire rockets into Israel. How? How do we incentivize that? And I think Dan Bongino's thing would just be bomb the hell out of them. So your conclusion to protect Palestinian civilians is to do an extensive bombing campaign? Or does he mean negotiate? Which I doubt he means negotiate. I don't think Dan Bongino is saying we should negotiate with Hamas because, you know, Hamas is bad. So what is the solution? Sorry, I felt the presence. Anyway, back to stream.
Your debate on you are so misinformed on this. It's pathetic.
Look behind me. There's nothing behind me. I don't know what you're talking about.
Bloodthirsty, savage.
Let me calm the waters here. Let me calm the water. Geraldo.
He's asking to respond, and Sean wants to jump in and add more. They didn't bring him in here to talk. It's just punching bag nonsense. They wanted the fact that to them now their liberal punching bag is Geraldo blows me away. If you've gotten to the point where your liberal punching bag is Geraldo, I mean, he does have a good record of being a punching bag. Just ask the wrestler who slapped him around. But still, can we look at that clip one more time? Can we look at that clip one more time? We're going to talk about this clip too, if we have time. I don't think we will, though, where we're going to be starting the show in about, almost 30 minutes. Okay. Let's look it up. Let's look it up. Geraldo wrestling. Let's look at this clip one more time. It blows me away every time.
Used to be tag team partner of Eddie Mansfield, the wrestler who's just told us how every match is fake. I asked Schultz questions that I assume all wrestlers have been asked dozens of times.
What? Is this a good business?
Yeah, it's a good business. I wouldn't be in it if it wasn't.
Why is it a good business?
Because only the tough survive. That's the reason you ain't in it. And this punk holding the camera reading he ain't in it. Reading these rednecks out here ain't in it. Because it's a tough business.
That's terrific.
What, is that all you got?
I'll ask you the standard question. You know?
Standard question.
I think this is fake.
You think it's fake? What's that? Is that fake? Huh? What the hell's wrong with you? That's open hand slap, huh? You think it's fake? You talk like that with face? Huh? What do you mean?
I'm sorry. That gets me every time. Does that feel fake? Does that feel fake? That's John Stossel. John Stossel and Geraldo, basically, they look very similar. Don't they? I thought they were the same person. John Stossel. They kind of have the same vibe. Okay, they don't look that similar. Okay, that's on me. Still, it's a good clip, even if it isn't him. Sorry.
Let me calm the waters here. Geraldo, who started this war? Who started firing the rockets? And who's firing them?
Where do you want to go? You want to go back to 1948, 1967, 1973?
You want to go back to the 48 peace partition, the 67, 73 war?
Start?
And yes.
They're just throwing out dates. You want to go back to 1948? You want to go now to 1967? You want to go to 1973? You want to go to the Oslo Accords? You want to go to Fatah? You want to go over to Hamas? Just throwing out different dates at this time. Want to go back to 1917, 1884, and 1902? Just throwing out dates now. Just trying to outdo each other. Like, look how smart I am. Look how smart I am. This is some high-level dialogue that's going on now.
I've been to Israel. I've been to you know what? I've been to the border with Gaza.
I've covered every war since 1973 until 2012.
Kids can't play
Iron Dome missile
in an outdoor playground because they can't get in a bunker. They play in indoor bunker playgrounds.
That's very touching, and that's very sad. 2 UN schools, which also had playgrounds, were bombed in the recent Israeli airstrikes in Gaza. So I don't know if that was the best example for what Sean's point is trying to be here.
I've seen the rockets, 10,000 in one city in 10 years.
A Palestinian
Here's my
life
question,
is exactly equal to an Israeli life or an American life.
Who do you blame for firing the rockets first? Who do you blame for firing it from densely populated areas and hospitals and schools?
This current chapter of this ongoing violence started when Israeli cops raided the Aqsa Mosque in the old city of Jerusalem.
Get out of here.
It is one of the most sacred.
Just lying.
It is one of the most sacred places.
You don't know what you're talking about.
It is one of the most sacred places in the.
I'm sorry, but Dan Bongino could not find Palestine or Israel on a map. I'd be surprised he could find the Middle East on a map. I'm sorry. He cannot be questioning someone else's intelligence on Middle Eastern affairs. I am sorry.
This guy doesn't. Have you ever been? Have you been at war?
I've been there many times.
Have you?
I'm showing video of me there.
No, but you haven't either. That's the interesting thing.
I have been there multiple.
What do you mean he has been? He just talked about how he has been there. What are you talking about, Dan? I love how he stands there. Geraldo's like, have you been there? And he's just kind of mumbling, trying to think of a response because he hasn't. He knows nothing about this conflict. He knows nothing about what's going on in the Middle East. So he just responds, have you been there? He has. Half of this interview has been him describing how he's covered all these wars since 1973 and how he's been there reporting on it.
Times. That tunnel right there, that was built with Israeli and American money and cement, and that cement was meant for hospitals and schools, guys. That cement right there, 60 feet underground tunnels so that these terrorists can sneak in the dark of the night and kill Israelis and commit acts of terror.
Why don't you ever show the dead Palestinians?
The point of showing this footage is, of course, to target the idea of ever giving Palestine aid, of course, because the idea is Hamas will use the aid to do nefarious actions.
Why don't you ever show the video of the dead Palestinians?
Because if I ever step foot in Gaza, I'd be dead.
They don't count. It's like they don't exist.
You don't even understand the history.
Palestinian children are being killed and they don't exist. Demand a ceasefire.
You don't even understand your own history. Geraldo, who controlled that Palestinian area from 48 to 67?
Ceasefire.
The Jordanians.
American weapons used to kill children. Stop it.
So they can kill more Jews?
I demand a ceasefire.
All right.
A ceasefire so they could kill more Jews? Okay, I don't know what Dan thinks a ceasefire is, but a ceasefire means the fire ceases. So that would actually mean that everyone stops dying. A ceasefire wouldn't mean, okay, Israel stops its stuff and Hamas gets to just keep taking pot shots. That's not how a ceasefire works. A ceasefire means everyone would stop shooting, right? Oh my God, man. The intellect. This right here, when people like criticize Twitch panels and like this, Twitch panels is just too lowbrow for me. I can't do it. It's not intelligent enough. Just pop this on and show them this and say, okay, so would you rather them be watching this? We're not hurting anything.
Right, so they can rearm and kill more Jews. This is great.
All right, enough. Mediaite has their headline. We'll move on. All right, coming up.
Sean Hannity, show himself to be a respectful reporter once again.